The number of 5-star operators has increased since I made the top 10 video, making them a total of 141 5-star operators in the end server. Many other good operators didn't make it to the list. This one is sort of a continuation of that video, but it isn't a ranking list. It is a recommendation of a solid 10 5-star operator that you should consider building. So in this video, I will go over 10 operators' talents and skills so you can get an idea of how they work, and if you should add masteries to their skills and build their module if they have any. Also, this time I will add a 5-star alternative with similar strength in case you don't have the one I mentioned. I'm going to skip some of the operators' first skills if they are generic and bad to keep the video short. Without further ado, let's start with Ashlock. Ashlock is a fortress defender, which means she deals ranged AoE physical damage when not blocking enemies. And when blocking enemies, she deals damage to a single enemy like normal defenders. Her talent is Bombardment Studies. Attack plus 8%, if the 4 adjacent tiles are ground tiles, attack plus 16% instead. A bit stage dependent, but an attack buff is always welcomed on an operator with an already high attack stat. Her second skill is Focused Bombardment. Cannot block enemies and only carry out ranged attacks. Attack interval reduces, attack plus 40%. The attack increase might not seem like a lot, but the reduced attack interval, her high attack stat, and the SP cost make it an excellent and consistent DPS skill. Her not blocking enemies isn't a big problem since the skill duration is only 10 seconds. That means you can easily play around it. Plus, Ashlock will usually be behind other lane holders, so it is rare when she needs to block. Should you add masteries to her second skill? This skill is a great target for M3 as it significantly reduces her attack interval, therefore increasing her DPS substantially. Should you build her module? The module adds the equipped trait of increasing the attack to 110% when attacking blocked enemies. You can easily trigger this trait if you strategize your other operator's deployment before deploying Ashlock. At level 3, it improves the talent to attack plus 10%, and if the 2 tiles to the front and back are ground tiles, attack plus 20% instead. This module is not game-changing for her, but if you want to maximize her damage, go for it. Recommended alternatives. The alternative to Ashlock is Fire Whistle. She deals art damage with her skill, so she is better when facing high defense enemies, but Ashlock's damage is more consistent in general content. The next operator is also a defender, Nearl. Nearl is a guardian defender, which means she can heal her allies by using her skill. Her talent is Pegasus's Halo. Increases the healing effect received by all allies on the battlefield by 10% when deployed. A great talent that supports all healers, and it pairs great with her kit since it is all about healing. Her first skill is First Aid. Restores the HP of a nearby ally with less than 50% HP by 150% of Nearl's attack in the next attack. This skill can store 2 charges. A simple skill yet quite effective healing. The 50% HP prevents her from wasting her healing on a near full HP target, and it is also versatile, as you can use it as a support for your medics, or it can be used as a medic substitute in case there aren't any deployable tiles for them. On top of that, it works well with her talent and module, which I will talk about in a second. Should you add masteries to her first skill? It increases the charges hold to 3, which can be very clutch in hard content. The SP cost is down by 1 and the healing is increased significantly. If you don't have her 6-star counterparts, this skill is worth it to M3. Should you build her module? Her module adds the trait of increasing her healing by 15% when healing allied units with less than 50% HP, which seems like it is made to complement her first skill. It also improves the healing received from her talent to 15% to all allies when Nearl is deployed. Overall, a further improvement to her healing capabilities, so it is recommended to build it. Recommended alternatives. I recommend Bassline in case where you don't have Nightingale for dealing with art damage, or in case you have Saria, then Bassline would offer you more utility with art resistance and shields. We are not done with defensive operators yet. Beeswax is a phalanx caster, which means she normally does not attack but has her defense increased by 2 times and art resistance by plus 20 when her skill is inactive. When her skill is active, attacks deal AoE art damage, but she loses the defense and art resistance buff. Her talent is Shambhala's Sanctuary. When her skill is not active, restore 4% max HP per second. The amount of HP restored is a lot, and it pairs well with her trait and her role as a defensive ranged operator. Her second skill is Guardian Obelisk. Summons an obelisk upon a melee tile within this unit's attack range. When the obelisk appears, it deals 230% attack as arts damage to nearby enemies and stuns them for 1.5 seconds. The obelisk will spawn in a random melee tile in her range, so make sure to min-max her placement to get it summoned in the tiles you want. Also, if possible, let the enemies get a bit close to her when activating this skill, that way you don't block the enemies out of her attack range. Other than that, the damage and the stun are decent, and ranged enemies will prioritize the obelisk since it is the last deployed ally, which is great since Beeswax loses her defensive trait when her skill is active. Plus, it works as a great temporary lane holder thanks to its massive max HP of 5003 blocks. Should you add masteries to her second skill, it gets a reduction from 26 SP cost at level 7 to 20 SP cost at M3, which makes the skill more reliable for crowd control, as it also increases the stun duration by an additional 1.5 seconds, so it is highly recommended for M3. Should you build her module? The module changes the trait to now letting Beeswax retain some of the defense and art resistance when her skill is active. It also improves the talent by adding plus 15% max HP when her skill is not active at level 3. The module improves her survivability by a decent amount, and you can unlock most of its power at level 2. Recommended alternative. The alternative for Beeswax is Mint. I can only describe them as same but different. Only Mint is obtainable for free from the start and Beeswax is a gacha operator. Next operator is Kazemaru. She is a dollkeeper specialist, which means she does not retreat upon receiving lethal damage. Instead, she swaps to a substitute that has 0 block. She swaps back to the original after 20 seconds. Her talent is From Paper Comes Life. When substitute is summoned, it will deal 270% of its attack as arts damage to enemies in the surrounding 8 tiles. A strong burst of arts damage that can easily triggered by her skills. It helps her and her substitute easily clear groups of non-elite enemies. Her second skill is Origami Art, Twin Shadows. Immediately sacrifices 50% of this unit's current HP, gaining plus 90% attack and summoning a substitute on a surrounding melee tile to assist in combat. When the substitute is summoned, it activates her talent, and with the highly increased attack. Kazemaru and her substitute will deal a lot of damage at a low SP cost of 20. The sacrificed 50% HP helps her cycle between herself and the substitute, triggering her talent more often. Should you add masteries to her second skill? Masteries increase her damage by a decent amount, but it is not worth the investment as it doesn't offer much besides that. Should you build her module? Her module improves the trait to increase the substitute's attack and it increases the talent's damage as well. The damage increase on a trait is good, but the talent damage won't be increased by much, especially at level 3, so I recommend the module at level 2. Recommended alternative. The alternative to Kazemaru is Benna. She has a mix of physical and arts damage, and her doll is more durable than Kazemaru's. Next is another specialist operator, Manticore. Manticore is an ambusher specialist, which means she deals damage to all targets within her range. She has 50% physical and arts dodge, and she is less likely to be targeted by enemies. Her first talent is Hidden Killer, Elite. Stays invisible normally. The first attack made gains plus 50% attack and removes the invisible state. Regains invisible state after not attacking for 5 seconds. The survivability from her trait and the invisible of this talent allows you to deploy her away from your healers most of the time. Her first skill is Scorpion Venom. It's a passive skill that reduces the movement speed of targets hit by minus 35% for 4 seconds. Her attack interval of 3.5 seconds is lower than the time of the movement speed reduction. That means as long as the enemies are in her range, they would be perma-slowed, which makes this skill one of the best AoE slowing skills in the game. Her second skill is Toxic Overload. Attack wind up and attack interval increases. Attack plus 60% and hit targets are stunned for 0.7 seconds. The increase in the attack interval allows her to activate her talent damage with every attack. And the attack increase from this skill makes her a decent DPS and a great crowd control operator, especially given that this skill have only a 20 SP cost and 37 seconds duration, meaning it will be active most of the time. Should you add masteries to her skills? The first skill gets a huge improvement in movement speed reduction, going from minus 35% to minus 50%, and an extra second of movement speed reduction. The second skill gets a significant attack increase and more duration on the stun. In conclusion, both of her skills deserve to be M3, but I recommend you to only choose the one that you find yourself using more, as the masteries are quite expensive. Should you build her module? The module adds the trait of slowing the movement speed of enemies within this unit's attack range by 20%. At level 3, it improves the damage of the first hit from the talent by 10%. The damage increase is insignificant, but the slowing trait is a huge improvement for her, so I recommend you to build the module to only level 1. Next operator is a must-build in my opinion if you don't have her higher rarity counterparts, Projekt Red. Red is an executor specialist, which means she has a significantly reduced redeployment time. Her talent is Chill. Red will deal at least 30% of her attack as damage with every attack. This talent helps her deal some damage to high defense enemies that she wouldn't leave a scratch on otherwise. Her first skill is Execution Mode. After deployment, attack plus 65% and gain 40% physical and arts dodge for 10 seconds. This is her main damaging skill. The damage is decent but the dodge percentage is too low to be effective. Her second skill is Wolfpack. After deployment, immediately deal 200% attack as physical damage to all nearby enemies and stun them for 2 seconds. A good crowd control skill with decent damage to all enemies in her 4 adjacent tiles with a 2-second stun, which make it a good counter to herds of low HP enemies. On top of that, it holds an edge over other stun skills since Red can be deployed on most tiles in the stage, and she doesn't require a setup. Should you add masteries to her skills? Masteries improve the damage and the stun on her second skill by a decent amount. But they are not game-changing for her. I would say build her masteries if she is your only damage-dealing fast redeploy, or if you really love her. Other than that, it is not a priority. Should you build her module? Her module adds the trait of increasing her damage by 10% when there are no allied units in the 4 adjacent tiles. It also improves her talent to now dealing at least 40% of her attack as damage with every attack at level 3. A good module with a decent increase in her damage especially against high defense enemies, so it's recommended to build it. Recommended alternative. A good alternative is Kafka, though she is more catered to crowd control with the sleep mechanic and dealing art damage. Next is one of the best arts damage dealers in this rarity, Rockrock. Rockrock is a Manticore caster, which means she controls a drone that deals arts damage to an enemy. When the drone continuously attacks the same enemy, its damage will increase. The drone will start attacking with 20% of Rockrock's attack and will increase by 15% with each attack until it reaches 110% of her attack. Her talent is Firm Foundation, plus 4% attack for every 15 seconds Rockrock remains on the battlefield, stacking up to 4 times. Because the Manticore casters attack alongside their drones, they made their attack stat low to balance this archetype, so every bit of attack from this talent helps her DPS by a lot. But this also means you need to deploy her early. Her second skill is Willing Burden. Attack speed plus 60 releases drone to attack enemies. Overdrive, trait max drone damage increased to 1.7 times, attack plus 50%. When the skill ends, stun for the same duration as the overload. The drone locks onto an enemy until the enemy is defeated or until the skill is over, then returns to the operator. You can manually deactivate the skill at will. The attack speed helps her trait build faster, and in the overdrive where the real damage comes into play. Just like her trait and talent, it needs some time to get online. But when it does, Rockrock becomes one of the best single-target arts damage dealers in her rarity. And the drone will lock into an enemy, so even if the enemy walks out of her range, the drone will follow them across the stage. Should you add masteries to her second skill? Masteries improves her attack speed and max drone damage significantly, and because her only purpose is being a damage dealer, it's recommended to add masteries to this skill. Should you build her module? Her module improves her drone's initial attack from 20% to 35%. The talent's 4% attack will stack every 10 seconds instead of 12, and when fully stacked, increase the attack speed by plus 5. Overall, this module helps both her talent and trait charge faster, so it is highly recommended. But only at level 2 since level 3 only adds 5 attack speed. Recommended alternative. Alternatives to Rockrock are Minimalist if you want to do an AFK clears, or Kira for crowd control, and both of them are free operators. Next operator is more support-oriented. Elysium is a flagbearer, which means he cannot block enemies when his skill is active. His talent is Sniper Support. When deployed, all sniper operators have -2 DP cost and gain plus 20 attack speed when Elysium's skill is active. This talent helps you deploy snipers early in the stage, which is something you should be doing. Like I've said before, in Arknights it is better to deploy ranged operators before the melee ones when possible, because ranged enemies will target the last deployed operator in their range, so in this way you will force them to attack melee operators which have more HP and defense, keeping your ranged operators safe. The attack speed helps the snipers kill enemies fast. That way you won't leak any before deploying your melee operators. His first skill is Support Y, stops attacking and recovers 18 DP over the skill duration. This is his most efficient skill to gain DP. All the flagbearers have a variation of this as their first skill, and it is what makes flagbearers the best DP generators in the game. His second skill is Monitor, stops attacking and recovers 20 DP over the skill duration. While this skill is active, locks up to 4 nearby enemies. Locked enemies have -60% movement speed, -25% defense, and lose invisible. This is a great support skill for his rarity. The range is big, the numbers on the movement speed and defense debuff are significant, and this skill works especially great with snipers, offering them more DPS and time to deal with fast enemies. The invisible reveal is also great on a wide range to counter invisible enemies, which are fairly common. Should you add masteries to his skills? It is recommended to mastery 3 his first skill if you are planning on using him as your main flag bearer. His second skill gets less SP cost and more defense debuff, but it doesn't affect his performance by much, so I won't recommend you to M3 it, unless you really like him and you are using it in general content. Should you build his module? His module adds the trait of granting a +1 block to an operator in front of Elysium when his skill is active. It also increases the attack speed of Sniper from +20 to +25 at level 3. Because of the range of his second skill, you will mostly deploy Elysium in a few tiles ahead of your lane holders, so the +1 block won't come into effect most of the time, unless you are using his first skill. +5 attack speed isn't much to build the module to level 3 just for it. With that being said, I don't recommend building his module. Next is an operator you call when the enemy boss refuses to die. Shamare is a debuffer supporter. Her talent is Omen of Defeat. Apply 30% fragile effect to enemies within range with less than 40% HP. The fragile effect increases the physical, arts, and true damage taken by the stated percentage. In this case 30%. This talent's 40% HP restriction makes it a little impractical, but 30% more damage is a lot, especially on a talent not a skill. Her second skill is Cursed Doll. Obtains 1 Cursed Doll. Reduces the attack and defense of enemies around the Cursed Doll by -30%. Lasts for a maximum of 15 seconds. This skill is one of the best debuffs in the game. The best case use for it is when you are against a tanky boss with both high defense and resistance. Your physical damage dealers will have a great advantage over the said boss. And not only in damage, this skill helps your operator take serious hits by debuffing enemies' attack. Also, one of the strength points of this skill is it doesn't have a duration. The doll itself has a 15-second duration, but the skill doesn't, which means it will start recharging immediately after you deploy the doll. Another strength point is the Cursed Doll can be deployed on any deployable tile in the stage, even outside of Shamare's range. Should you add masteries to her second skill? Masteries boost this skill by a significant amount. At M3, it reduces the SP cost from 38 to 30, and it further decreases the attack and defense of enemies from -30% to -50%. So it's highly recommended if you are planning on using Shamare regularly. Should you build her module? Her module adds the trait of inflicting 10% weaken on the target for 2 seconds. 10% weaken means it reduces the target attack by 10%. It also adds a talent of becoming less likely to be targeted by enemies after being deployed for 10 seconds, which is fine but not necessary in most cases. So I recommend you build the module to only level 1 to get the weaken effect. Recommended alternative. A good alternative is Praminix if you don't care about debuffing enemies' attack, or if you want to use art damage dealers since her second skill reduces art resistance. And last but not least, Tequila. Tequila is a Liberator guard. Normally he does not attack and has 0 block. When his skill is inactive, his attack gradually increases over time to a cap, and the attack buff is reset when the skill ends. That means you need to let him charge his attack buff for a minimum of 20 seconds and a maximum of 40 seconds for best results. His talent is Waiting Game. When his skill is inactive, deals 23% of Tequila's attack as arts damage to the attacker when Tequila is attacked. This is a good talent that makes use of him when he is charging his skill and trait, and don't worry about him being a bait. He has high HP and defense stats. His second skill is Esoteric Blade Work. Attack range expands and attacks 2 enemies simultaneously. Every attack deals 200% attack as physical damage. Charged effect changes to attacking 3 enemies simultaneously, and skill duration is extended to 30 seconds. You can deactivate this skill manually. This skill is one of the best damage skills for the 5-star rarity. But other than being a nuke, it has some downside. It takes a lot of time, specifically 40 seconds to reach its full damage potential. And you can't really cheat it by having an SP battery supporter because it needs the attack buff from the trait. That also takes 40 seconds to charge. But you can always use it preemptively if you are in a pinch or want to kill trash mobs. Setbacks aside, he has only 10 DP cost, so you can deploy him early to charge his skill and trait. And for the amount of damage this skill deals, 40 seconds is a fair downtime. Should you add masteries to his skills? Masteries don't add anything except a little more damage, so I don't recommend it. These were my recommendations for some 5-star operators you should consider building. Let me know which operators you are planning on building, and which ones you have already built. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.